Hello and welcome to Unacademy IAS English, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the daily Hindu news analysis. So let's begin today's discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen 8 important articles. There are 4 articles that require a thorough detailed analysis as they are important both for your prelims and mains, and we have few small articles which are important only for the prelims exam. So let's cover all these topics comprehensively so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. If you guys are liking our initiatives, do support us with your likes and comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Before we start the discussion, we have 2 important announcements. One, UCAN course which has begun from yesterday, Unacademy's Current Affairs Navigator. This is an opportunity for you to cover your current affairs and ensure that you're thorough with all the recent developments from different subjects. So yesterday, I have taken a session on the current affairs related to international relations and as well as internal security and disaster management. And today, Mukesh Jha sir will be taking up a current affairs session on environment and ecology. So don't forget to tune in live at 8 p.m. on our YouTube channel and ensure that you are up to date with your current affairs preparation. So UCAN program will provide you 15 free classes in the month of November to help you cover current affairs in a subject-based format. And the second important announcement is about the Unacademy Scholarship Test, which is a great opportunity for civil services aspirants to win attractive scholarships to our IAS program and also win attractive rewards. And more importantly, it gives an opportunity for you to attempt a UPSC level question paper. So this scholarship test will be conducted on the 10th of November. That is the coming Sunday at 11 a.m. and 5 p.m. So do enroll for the test. The link is provided in the video description and you stand a chance to win attractive scholarships so that our courses become more affordable to the deserving students. So with this, let's get started with today's discussion by looking at this important column on page number 8. This article raises important issues related to society and how technology, if it is misused, can create security problems and affect the society and create social issues as well. The focus of the article is on the misuse of AI and social media. How artificial intelligence and social media platforms and other online spaces could be misused, which could particularly affect women. How it could increase the gender bias and the divide and discrimination that already exists in a male-dominated society. This is the focus of the column written by Manish Tiwari. The context here is that in the recent US presidential election campaign, if you look at Kamala Harris, who is the presidential candidate for the Democrat Party, she has been the victim of targeted campaign based on fake news, misinformation and disinformation to discredit her presidential campaign. A lot of deep fake videos have been circulated in online spaces. Deep fakes are essentially hyper-realistic media, which looks very real, very original and genuine. But these are essentially created through AI algorithms. So it could be an audio file or an image or a video file. Such deep fakes created through artificial intelligence, when they are circulated on social media and other online spaces, they have the potential to go viral. And if these deep fakes are defamatory in nature, if they are designed to discredit someone, to harm someone, to harm someone's reputation, and especially that of women in position of power, this represents a serious threat to the society and as well as to the country, to the democracy itself. In fact, in the United States, there is a very dangerous precedent in the American society and in American democracy. The country till date has never elected a woman president. The country has never elected a woman president, that too a woman of color. who comes from a mixed African Indian heritage. So this also shows the deep-rooted patriarchy that prevails in the conservative American society. Many of you might think US is a developed, progressive country. That is true as well to some parts of United States. But still, by and large, in several states in the US, especially in the hinterland and in some of the conservative states, the US remains very backward when it comes to women's rights and equal gender rights. So given that Kamala Harris, who is a presidential candidate, has been a victim of such targeted campaigns on social media, where AI-based deepfakes have been used to troll Kamala Harris, to humiliate and discredit her campaign, this represents a threat not just to American elections and American democracy, it represents a threat to American society as well. Because this is not just a one-off incident. We have seen many such cases coming up in recent months. US politician Nikki Haley was also targeted with such defamation campaigns and disinformation campaigns. Even Italian Prime Minister Meloni has been targeted with deep fakes, which are often sexually explicit as well. And even memes are made out to troll women in positions of power. And this represents a major risk as far as safety of women and dignity of women is concerned. If you look at Bangladesh as well, earlier this year, Bangladesh went into elections in January 2024. So some of the women politicians were targeted on social media where AI-based deepfakes were used to spread misinformation and disinformation. So this represents a major risk and a major threat. So we need to understand what is the impact of misuse of technology. Technologies like AI and social media platforms, if they are misused to spread fake news, to carry out propaganda, how does this affect the society? How does this affect the security of a democratic state? And how does this affect women in particular? That is the focus of the discussion in this column. So misinformation is essentially the spreading of wrong information. But there is no malicious intention to harm someone, to discredit someone, or to target someone. So when information which is not entirely correct, which is falsified, if this is spreading, right, this is seen as part of misinformation. Misinformation campaigns, they basically contain half-truths or partial truths. And the information is manipulated. Maybe it could be miscreants or vested interests who might be doing it, but there is no deliberate intention to target anyone or harm anyone or to benefit out of spreading the misinformation. Whereas disinformation is much more dangerous. In case of disinformation, there is a planned attempt to target someone, to target the government, to target an individual, or to target organizations and companies, to discredit them, to defame them, to spread wrong information through fake news and propaganda, so that their image can be hurt, their image can be dented, which could have a real world impact. So disinformation is much more dangerous compared to misinformation. But on social media, ever since the rise of social media, since early 2000, we have seen the increasing misuse of these tech platforms and online spaces, which has increased the threat for the society and for the security of a nation. Elections can be disrupted and manipulated through such campaigns of misinformation, disinformation, which can be used to spread political propaganda. The same can be used to spread religious extremism. And this represents a serious threat to modern civilization itself. So that is the concern the writer is highlighting. So how do we address this problem? What measures can be taken up by countries and at the global level to tackle this threat, the menace of misuse of AI and social media platforms, which is particularly targeting women? Compared to men, well-known women in particular, women who are in positions of power, women celebrities, have often become the target of these campaigns. You can clearly see gender-based stereotypes being promoted through these memes and these deep fakes. Sometimes sexually explicit content also is circulated to defame them. This has happened in the case of Kamala Harris, Italian Prime Minister Meloni. and it clearly shows how women are vulnerable when it comes to these online spaces and new technologies. So the answer is, we need to bring more women into the development of these technologies. This is extremely crucial, and the writer makes a very valid point that currently in the tech industry, you don't have enough number of women on the development side of the technology. If you look at the top AI companies, be it OpenAI or let's say even Meta or Alphabet, which owns Google, even if you look at other big tech giants, Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, and the others, they have a disproportionately higher number of men who are involved on the development side of this critical technology. So representation of women within the tech industry is a major concern, because the factors that affect women are not exactly considered by the developers. So if you look at social media platforms and how content is regulated on their platforms, these policies, the so-called community standards and guidelines of social media companies like again Meta and Google, etc., it is largely determined by the leadership which is male dominated. In fact, the writer even presents some data from the tech industry focusing on the big tech companies, the big tech giants. Most of them are American companies based out of San Francisco from the Bay Area. And the writer presents data to show how most of these social media firms, big tech giants and AI firms, they are male dominated, which probably highlights why there is no adequate care being taken regarding the misuse of these technologies, which is leading to targeting of women. So writer suggests that the companies have to work harder to make the employment space more inclusive, to ensure that there is more priority given to women in leadership roles, so that they can not only shape the technology and help in the building of the technology, but they can also help in shaping the policies of the companies with regard to content moderation. Because these companies are very slow to act. Even if there is harmful content on their platforms, which is defaming someone, even if it is sexually explicit content, which is targeting women in positions of power, most of these platforms have allowed such content to circulate and remain on their platforms, just by saying that it is in the interest of protection of freedom of speech and expression. If the content doesn't violate their community standards, they don't block or take down the content. They don't even cooperate with law enforcement agencies. And this has become a global problem. Most governments are dealing with this challenge. How do we regulate social media and ensure that harmful content on these platforms is regulated, removed, and appropriate action is initiated? So this is where social media firms are lacking. So the involvement of more women in leadership roles in the development of the technology and in policy making could help in better content moderation and regulation of the content. So this is a very valid suggestion that the writer is providing, and I think we need to include this when we are writing an answer for a question on this topic. Now, if you look at AI technology, AI is as good as the training data which it is fed with. I'm sure you know that AI programs are essentially machine learning neural networks which learn from the training data which is fed into the algorithm. You look at ChatGPT, which is based on the large language model. It is all based on the data which it is fed with. That is how the algorithms are trained, and they learn from real world data, and the machine starts improving its performance and predictions. The problem is the training data itself. It includes the societal biases, stereotypes which are already present in our society. Given that most societies are male-dominated patriarchal societies, the discrimination seen against women in the society, the objectification of women, which is quite common in patriarchal societies, this is reflected in the data which is present in the real world, which eventually becomes the training data to train the AI algorithms. So the AI algorithms are inherently biased. Now, social media companies are saying that we are moderating the content. They have deployed AI tools and they have automated content moderation along with setting up manual review teams. They have recruited a number of reviewers to ensure that the policy guidelines are maintained, the community standards are maintained. So you can report any objectionable post, any objectionable content, raise a grievance, and the companies are trying to address that. So they do have manual reviews in place along with automated reviews which are AI based. But the problem is manual reviews can never be capable of dealing with the large volume of content which is hosted on these platforms. Manual review might work in certain specific cases, but across social media and online spaces, manual review may not be the way forward. So if you are using AI-based content regulation, the problem is the training data itself is corrupted. The AI program is trained on biased data, which already includes the social stereotypes and biases, which includes gender-based bias, bias against minorities, etc. So such tools and programs will continue the discrimination even when it comes to content regulation and moderation on social media platforms. So if you look at India, recently we have introduced a regulation for social media under the IT rules of 2021. This was notified under the Information Technology Act of 2000. And under the IT rules, the Ministry of Electronics and IT is now empowered to regulate social media intermediaries. The social media intermediaries, they are categorized into the smaller social media firms and the large social media intermediaries, and a set of obligations is placed on them as part of this new regulatory framework. See, under the IT Act, these social media companies are given a safe harbor. Essentially, they are given a legal immunity from criminal charges and prosecution for the content which is posted on their platform by third parties. That is, if the users are posting content on social media platforms, the company will not be held liable or directly accountable for the content, even if it is objectionable, even if it is illegal. This safe harbor was provided by most countries, including India, to encourage the tech industry. But given the threat posed by the misuse of social media, now it has become essential to no longer provide this legal immunity if the companies are not showing due diligence to comply with the regulatory norms and provisions. For example, if you look at cases in India, even when genuine cases of misuse of social media came up, where actual crime was being committed by misusing social media, where actual security threats, law and order problems were being created through misuse of social media, even then these companies did not show the willingness to cooperate with police and law enforcement. They wouldn't take down the content or block those accounts. They wouldn't assist investigating agencies to find out the originator of the message. So as a result, it became essential for the government to bring in these regulatory guidelines and strictly enforce them through the IT Act. So now under the IT rules, the due diligence, if it is not shown by the company, if the company doesn't cooperate with the government, the police and law enforcement, if it does not take down the content within a given deadline, if it doesn't help the authorities trace the originator of a message which has been a threat to the security of the country and law and order of the nation, and if the company doesn't oblige and follow all these regulations, then the safe harbor will be revoked by the government. The Ministry of Electronics and IT can revoke the safe harbor provision provided under Section 79 of the IT Act, which means the company officials will be liable to be arrested and criminal charges can be pressed against them for hosting objectionable, unlawful content on their platforms. So this is a major change brought out by India. Even though it's controversial, the government justifies that such stringent regulation is necessary given the large-scale misuse of social media which is happening. The controversy is that the criticism against the IT rules is that this can be misused by the government. This tremendous power can be misused by the government to target any content which is critical of the government. So government can cripple your right to free speech and expression under Article 19 by ordering social media companies to take down content and block accounts which are critical of the government as well. So there are no adequate checks and balances in that regard. So that is why there's a lot of criticism against the IT rules. The same set of IT rules also regulates other new age technologies like OTT platforms, digital media, even online gaming has been brought under the ambit of IT rules of 2021. It was recently amended last year to include online gaming as well. So all new age technologies are being regulated under the IT rules. So such government regulation would be necessary to hold the social media companies accountable for the content on their platform. But at the same time, there should be a balance. There should be checks and balances to prevent the abuse of this power, because this is tremendous power in the hand of the government. Now, these social media companies are obligated under the IT rules to appoint a chief compliance officer, a grievance redressal officer. They should be residents of India, working from an office in India. So these obligations have to be followed by the companies. They have to take down any unlawful content, block those accounts, help the authorities trace the originator of the message. They have to comply within a given deadline. So if they don't show that diligence, if they don't show compliance with these regulations, then government will determine that the company is not showing due diligence, and the legal immunity, that is the safe harbor granted under Section 79, will be revoked, which could open up the company officials and the company itself for legal criminal prosecution. So this is what we take away from this important article. Now do let me know what you think on this topic. What is your view? What is your opinion? Are women facing greater discrimination compared to men on social media? Do you think AI, especially deep fakes generated through AI, which is circulated on social media, is a serious threat for the safety, dignity of women, that too for women in positions of power? Can it threaten the society, the security of a nation? Can it disrupt elections? Do let me know in the comments. So please take up this practice question. Let's see what kind of mains question can be asked. The misuse of AI and online spaces poses a threat to the safety and dignity of women. Elaborate. So let's see how you can build a good answer for this question. So since this is a very broad question, focusing on the misuse of these technologies, how it can threaten the safety and dignity of women, I would suggest that you start out with some examples. Provide some incidents which are reported in newspapers to clearly bring out this concern, which is an emerging threat. You can take the example of Kamala Harris. Despite being a US presidential candidate, she has been the target, she has been the victim of trolls who have been using deep fakes to humiliate the presidential candidate and to discredit the presidential candidate. So it is clearly a threat to the safety and dignity of women. You can even mention the incident involving Italian Prime Minister Meloni, or there have been incidents in India as well, where Indian celebrities have been targeted. So you can mention those specific examples to point out how the misuse of AI through deep fake technology and the misuse of social media platforms, it does represent a threat to the society, particularly to the safety and dignity of women. You can even you can also mention that it represents a threat to the security of the nation, to law and order in a country. It can be used to disrupt elections as well. So please bring this out in the introduction. So you're setting the context. Then in the body, discuss the concerns in detail. Use the points we brought out in the analysis and try to present those concerns. You can discuss how the training data could be corrupted because of the biases and stereotypes present in the society that will enter the AI algorithms as well. So you can point out the challenges in content moderation, how social media companies are not entirely complying with the rules and regulations. You can take the example of Elon Musk, how Elon Musk, who owns X, has played a role in propagating such messages. This is a deep concern. These billionaires who have tremendous control and power over these firms, they have been at the forefront of circulating deep fakes. Elon Musk himself circulated a deep fake of Kamala Harris. I hope you know. Elon Musk has declared his support for Donald Trump's campaign, and he hasn't held back. He has openly used the platform X that he owns to spread fake news and misinformation targeting the opponent, that is Kamala Harris. So you can point out how these companies have tremendous control, how the big tech, not just one company, but in general, the big tech industry, how they have tremendous control over this market and how it could be potentially misused. So bring out all those concerns one by one and then provide suggestions. How do you tackle this? In the next part of the body, provide the countermeasures, the suggestions. You can discuss the IT rules of India, discuss the need for more women in the development of the technology and in policy making within these companies as well. How content moderation regulation has to be improved by the company with greater involvement of women, right? So mention all those pointers and then conclude your answer. In the conclusion, you can mention that any revolutionary technology, it has great potential. It will bring a lot of advantages. At the same time, if it is in the wrong hands, it can be misused, right? And today, misuse of AI and other emerging technologies, critical technologies, could have a detrimental impact on security of a nation and as well as law and order and as well as on stability of a society. So point that out, highlight how serious this risk is and focus on safety and dignity of women. Even in the conclusion, point out how women become more vulnerable on social media or on online spaces compared to men. So that would make for a good conclusion because you're clearly highlighting the vulnerability of women as far as misuse of these technologies are concerned, and you're providing the required solutions as well as part of your answer. So that would make for a good structured answer. So I hope the topic is clear. Now let's move on to the next article. We have an editorial on page number 8, which is important for internal security under GS paper 3. This article is related to the recent security situation in Jammu and Kashmir. I hope you guys are aware that in the last 2 to 3 weeks, there has been a sudden surge in terrorist attacks in Jammu and Kashmir. In the last 2 to 3 weeks, multiple terror attacks have occurred in Jammu and Kashmir. Several civilians have been killed. A few soldiers of Indian Army have also been martyred. According to reports, around 10 civilians have been killed, and especially non-local migrant workers are being specifically targeted. In the last 2 years, we have seen such trends developing in Jammu and Kashmir, where even minorities, religious minorities, have been targeted by the militants. So this appears to be a well-planned campaign to bring more instability in Jammu and Kashmir. So let's analyze and understand these developments and its impact on the security of Jammu and Kashmir. See, J&K is not new to militancy. J&K has been suffering from militancy from 1987. When popular discontent, it burst open, triggering the separatist movement, following the rumors that the 1987 state elections were rigged and manipulated by the Indian government. So based on this rumor that spread in 87, large-scale militancy broke out, leading to insurgency and terrorism. And of course, this extremist movement is backed by Pakistan. There is cross-border support coming in from Pakistan, which fueled and enabled the threat against India. So this is a clear case of state-sponsored cross-border terrorism. So 1990s was a very brutal decade as far as Jammu and Kashmir was concerned. In the late 80s, for example, by 1988-89, Pakistan managed to bring in foreign terrorists as well. The more hardcore foreign terrorists from Afghanistan and Pakistan, that is the Afghan Mujahideen, they were introduced into Kashmir to scale up the attacks against India. So during this period, when militancy took root in Jammu and Kashmir, we saw deliberate attempts to target religious minorities. For example, Kashmiri Pandits. They were singled out by the terrorist elements at the behest of Pakistan, and this was a deliberate strategy. See, initially when the separatist movement broke out in J&K, it was just another separatist movement, very similar to various separatist movements we have seen in Northeast India and other parts of India. It was largely a political separatist movement led by local Kashmiris who were resenting the Indian state due to lack of development, lack of rights and opportunities. But this separatist movement was hijacked by Pakistan as part of its covert war against India. Pakistan exploited the opportunity and introduced more radical terrorism from the Afghanistan-Pakistan region in order to communalize this conflict, to exploit India's communal divide. And Pakistan knew very well that if Hindu minorities are targeted by the extremist outfits, this would become a Hindu-Muslim issue and reverberate across the country, which could weaken the communal harmony in the country. And that is exactly what happened. So when the terror groups were used by Pakistan to target Kashmiri Pandits, it widened the communal divisions and it turned the J&K issue, the separatist movement and the entire J&K separatist issue into a communal issue between Hindus and Muslims. And till date, the J&K issue has a communal angle to it, and it weakens the Indian society internally. It widens our social divisions. And that is what Pakistan has always wanted. It has surgically used the terror outfits to carry out such targeted attacks aimed at minorities, aimed at certain specific groups, to ensure that J&K is always destabilized. And that is how Pakistan ensures that India keeps bleeding through 1,000 cuts. Apart from this, in 1990s and early 2000, we saw a major surge in militancy. Especially through 1990s, we saw a significant surge in militancy in Jammu and Kashmir, where armed forces became the prime target. As India imposed AFSPA, the Armed Forces Special Powers Act was brought in to empower the security forces which were tackling the terror and militant groups. And the Indian Army, along with the CRPF, started mounting these counterinsurgency, counter-terrorist operations. And the prime target of these militants would be the armed forces, the security forces, and even anything representing the state. Important government buildings, right? The convoys of security forces, the bases of Indian Army, those would become the primary target of the terror outfits. So we have seen how this has impacted Jammu and Kashmir in the past. These are deliberate attempts to weaken the state, to target minorities and increase the social divisions, and to destabilize the region further and spread this across the country as well. So we are seeing a recurrence of this strategy, and that too in a very sudden manner. See, recently Jammu and Kashmir went through elections. The Union Territory of J&K just went through its first election as a Union Territory after J&K was reorganized in 2019 following the revocation of its special status under Article 370. The first ever election in the Union Territory was held just a few weeks ago, and now we have a new government led by the National Conference. Apart from the elected government, the Lieutenant General of the Union Territory plays a critical role in the security and the administration of a Union Territory. So as soon as the new setup was put in place, elections were completed, the results were announced, the new government has been formed, and the newly elected government is working with the Office of Lieutenant General to address the issues in Jammu and Kashmir. So this is not a coincidence that we have seen a sudden surge in attacks, especially on non-local migrant workers and as well as on minorities in the last 2 weeks. There were attacks on important projects like the Zimor Tunnel project, which I had discussed a couple of weeks ago. This was the first time the terrorists had targeted a major infrastructure project, and they mainly attacked the migrant workers from other states. Because see, previously when J&K enjoyed special status under Article 370, those who are native to J&K, those who are domiciled in J&K, they enjoyed special privileges under Article 35A of the Indian Constitution. Only those who are domiciled in J&K could buy land. They would have a few special rights with regard to reservation, government subsidies, and even voting rights. They were all limited to the native local Kashmiri population. Outsiders wouldn't enjoy these rights. Now with that special status gone, Article 35 is also removed, and essentially it treats all Indians on par as far as Jammu and Kashmir is concerned. So one can understand why there is resentment against outsiders, against the non-local migrant workers in particular. So in recent months, we have seen these targeted attacks against migrant workers from Punjab, UP and Bihar. So it's a clear message by the militants to the government to keep outsiders out. There have been attempts to target religious minorities like Kashmiri Pandits again, to widen the communal divisions and to try and make this a Hindu-Muslim issue again. So the editorial is warning the state, the security forces to not fall for this strategy of the militants. You know what the militants are trying to do? They are basically trying to instigate and provoke the state. It is a deliberate attempt to instigate the state and the security forces. Because at some point, it might push the security forces to overreact and use massive force to tackle the rise in militancy, to curb the targeted attacks. And this could lead to a new era of repression. See, after decades of effort, we have managed to bring down violence in Jammu and Kashmir. Throughout early 2000, with better border management and with better border security, we tackled cross-border infiltration. With better intelligence gathering, right? We could break the terror modules and the financing networks. And from early 2000 itself, we saw a significant decline in militancy in J&K. The last 2 decades have been relatively more peaceful compared to the 80s and 90s, which was the most brutal period in Jammu and Kashmir. So this has been significant progress for India. And after the revocation of special status under Article 370, the government is solely focused on developing Jammu and Kashmir. Now that elections have happened, there is a demand for restoring statehood. The Modi government has promised as well, made a commitment that sometime in the near future, statehood might be restored to Jammu and Kashmir. So given that the focus of the government is development, stability and security, we should not fall prey to this strategy of the extremists, which might be backed by Pakistan. The Pakistani deep state is closely involved in planning and executing these attacks. There is no doubt about it. The strategy of the militants to increase attacks in the Jammu region, to focus on non-local migrant workers and target religious minorities, it clearly shows that there is a larger nefarious plan, a bigger agenda to widen the divisions in J&K, to destabilize the region and to instigate the government to push the security forces to the brink so that they are forced to overreact. And if they were to overreact, if they try to use harsh measures to target the surge in militancy, this could lead to a new era of repression. Basic rights would be curbed. Right to free speech and expression, right to movement, and even right to life. Because under AFSPA, security forces will have a right to take life. That too with legal immunity. It almost provides blanket immunity to the forces, even when the security forces open fire and kill a civilian. So the editorial is cautioning the government and security forces to not fall for this strategy of the extremists. Because if the state were to retaliate with massive force, any such massive counterinsurgency, counter-terrorist efforts could lead to repression at the ground level of the locals. Right now, there is a clear sign that local Kashmiri youth, they are moving away from the path of extremism. Just look at the recent elections. Look at the voter turnout. It is quite impressive. Even in the recently concluded Lok Sabha elections, the voter turnout from J&K was quite impressive. That shows the growing belief amongst the people of J&K with regard to the Indian constitution and faith in Indian democratic process. So we should not lose the hard-earned gains of the last 20-25 years. And we should not fall for this provocation by the terrorists who might be backed by the deep state of Pakistan. Of course, we need to counter the terror elements, but with the required force, with proportionate minimal force. If security forces are tempted to use massive force, this might lead to new repression that could create more resentment between the locals and the security forces. Because when you're fighting an ideological war, dealing with a local insurgency, it's important to ensure locals are on the side of the state. The locals should be backing the security forces, not the extremists. And for that, security forces have to build trust with the local population. In the recent elections, if you see how the people voted, a few political candidates who were contesting the elections, if they were aligned with hardline elements and extremist factions, they were all rejected by the voters. They did not win the elections because voters have rejected them. So there is a positive sign, which is very evident, very visible, that the faith in Indian elections, Indian democracy is growing and increasing. And we need to nurture and cultivate that while using the required proportionate force to target the militants and the cross-border support which is coming in. At any point, we should not be tempted to use massive disproportionate force because that could lead to repression, and this will further instigate the local population. So that is exactly what we need to avoid. So that is the caution being expressed by this editorial. So what kind of question can you anticipate? In GS paper 3, UPSC can ask you a specific question on the recent trend in terror attacks with regard to Jammu and Kashmir. The recent surge in terror attacks in J&K indicates a nefarious plan by militants and their sponsors to target non-locals and minorities. Evaluate the threat and countermeasures needed. So see if you can write a good answer for this question, and please post your answers in the comment section. Next, we have another interesting column on page number 8 written by Faizur Rahman, an Islamic scholar. Faizur Rahman is an advocate of moderate Islamic ideology, and he is a well-known theologist, and he essentially breaks apart the religious extremism, fundamentalism, which is being promoted by groups like Taliban, by extremist outfits like Taliban. See, before I begin this discussion, I would like to issue a disclaimer. Of course, the topic is sensitive, but please know that no religion preaches extremism. Be it Islam, be it Hinduism, Christianity, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism. No religion at its core, in its original form, preaches violence or extremism or fundamentalism. It is a few humans, right? A few political elements, vested elements in every faith, who twist the religious teachings for their own self-interests. And you find such strands of extremism and religious fundamentalism in every faith. Be it Christianity, be it Buddhism as well, the religion of peace, which is built on the tenet of ahimsa, is not free from extremists. So the fault doesn't lie with religion itself. If you understand the core tenet of every religion, it's absolutely beautiful. It provides a way of life. It provides the required tenets through which a society can lead a progressive life. But unfortunately, faiths are misused by certain elements, extremist, fundamentalist, right-wing forces in every religion. They give it a new interpretation. They misinterpret their own faith. They appropriate the religion to themselves. They proclaim themselves as the protectors and defenders of faith. They try to enforce their version of religion on others. That is what you mean by religious fundamentalism. So Taliban is one such religious fundamentalist outfit which has gained power in Afghanistan and formed the government in Afghanistan. So under the Taliban regime, there is repression going on of religious minorities and as well as that of women. As Taliban enforces its interpretation of Islam, which is a misinterpreted version of Islam, according to Faizur Rahman, it's not only leading to violation of human rights of religious minorities, but women in particular are at the receiving end. So here the writer breaks the myth that one attaches with religious extremism. The writer clearly points out with data, with evidence, right from the Quran itself, to show how Taliban is wrong in its interpretation, in its rather misinterpretation of the religious ideology and teachings. The writer points out that the Quran never ever promotes the forceful conversion of non-Muslims. Please take a look at this point. That's why, see, I gave a disclaimer at the beginning, right? The writer is very clear that Quran doesn't promote forceful conversions. It prohibits any kind of forceful conversion of non-Muslims. In fact, it is against the implementation of a rigid version of practicing faith and religion. But over centuries, these clerics who have a vested political interest, who might be aligned with authoritarian leaders, dictatorial regimes, they have twisted the religious teachings, misinterpreted faith according to their convenience to create and promote totalitarian states. That's what you see happening in Taliban. Right now, the supreme leader of Taliban Akhundzada, Hibatullah Akhundzada, who proclaims himself to be the supreme leader of the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, he has recently notified the policy of virtue and vice in Quran. The Quran talks about virtue and vice. Essentially, what is right, what is wrong, what is haram, what is prohibited, what is encouraged, what should be followed. Now, if you look at the teachings of Quran, it provides a way of life to ensure that there is a stable, progressive society. But certain extremist fundamentalist clerics and preachers who are aligned with authoritarian regimes since millenniums, they have misinterpreted the teachings. They have twisted the teachings, given it a wrong interpretation. In fact, if you look at what Taliban has recently introduced under the leadership of Akhundzada, Taliban has introduced this so-called policy of virtue and vice, where the rights of women has been further curbed. It not only imposes a strict religious dress code on women, where it's mandatory to wear a full covered hijab, but it also discourages women from interacting with non-Muslim women. It places strict restrictions on education of women, employment of women, and restricts all public sphere activity of women. The Quran never ever talks about this. The clerics who have worked with these authoritarian regimes, these fundamentalist regimes, they have twisted the teachings to provide for these interpretations. And the scholar correctly points out how totalitarian regimes benefit politically by misinterpreting religion. And you tell me honestly, don't you find such strands in every faith? In Christianity as well, in every other religion, you do find such vested political elements who are misusing faith, appropriating the religion to themselves, proclaiming themselves as the defenders of their faith, and misinterpreting religious teachings so that they gain political control. Look at how radical Buddhists have violated human rights in Sri Lanka and Myanmar. Take the Khalistan movement, for example. They have misinterpreted the beautiful religion of Sikhism. So like this in every faith, in Hinduism, in Christianity, you find these radical right-wing extremists, fundamentalists, who appropriate the faith to themselves, give it a wrong interpretation because they have a bigger political agenda to serve. That is exactly what Taliban is doing. It is misinterpreting the teachings of Quran and enforcing a totalitarian regime. In fact, Quran never talks about legal enforcement. The Islamic scholar clearly points out that Quran was never envisioned as a constitutional legal text to provide for strict obligations. But that is how Taliban makes it out to be. By imposing its version of the Sharia, by misinterpreting the teachings of Quran, it has done disservice to the faith itself. So the writer cautions us about the practice of these fundamentalists, these right-wing extremists, right, who misinterpret faith. This is the work of few political elements. They are using religion, rather misusing religion, misinterpreting the religious teachings for their own political interests. That is how Taliban came to power eventually. If you look at Taliban, right, the primary goal of Taliban was always to capture political control. And it has achieved that by misusing religion. Through religious fundamentalism, right-wing extremism is how Taliban was able to dominate Afghanistan, and today minorities and women and even Muslims are paying the price for the misinterpretation of religion and how it has been used for a political project. So this is a note of caution, a caution for everyone around the world, because in any faith, this is a possibility. If you allow fundamentalist extremists to misinterpret your faith and enforce the religious code, right? This will always serve the political agenda of the extremists, the authoritarian leaders, dictators who are looking for political domination. So that is what we take away from this important article. I think it's a very beautiful analysis that the theologist has given over here. So we can apply this across civilization, societies, and to understand how extremism, right-wing extremism in particular, right, could be dangerous for a civilized society. Now let's move on to another important article on the front page of the Delhi edition. On the front page, we have a headline, a very important headline. A Hindu temple in Canada has been defaced. It has become the site of an attack by pro-Khalistani extremists. Now, this is very concerning for India, and the matter is so serious that Prime Minister Narendra Modi has come out publicly and spoken about the incident and criticized the incident. See, what happened was near Toronto in Ontario, at a place called Brampton, the Indian diplomats and consular officials who are stationed in the Indian High Commission in Canada and the other consulates in Canada, they were running these camps, consular camps, to provide life certificates to Indians. So Indian diplomats and consular officials were conducting these camps around the country to help the Indians and Canadians with getting their life certificates. So at this event, where Indian diplomats were present with the Indian community, pro-Khalistani groups, they assembled at these camps, especially at a Hindu temple at Brampton, and they started shouting slogans against India, against the Prime Minister, against the country, calling for liberation of Khalistan. And this instigated the community, the Indian community, leading to clashes between them. And the pro-Khalistani extremists have allegedly defaced the temple as well, the Hindu temple, and this marks a significant escalation. So this is part of the ongoing tensions with Canada. India has always alleged that Canada has not tackled pro-Khalistan extremism, which has seen a revival, which has seen an increase in its threat to India. Right? And despite India's repeated warnings and notices, Canada has not proactively worked with India. Canada has even become hostile to India, alleging that India has been involved in the assassination of the pro-Khalistani elements. And Canadian government has linked it with Indian intelligence agencies like UNRWA. It's alleged that India has been using criminal organizations to assassinate Canadian citizens, leading to a diplomatic standoff with Canada. Now, this particular development is deeply concerning because this threatens the Indian community in Canada. It also poses a threat to Indian diplomats. So Canadian government has an obligation, it has a duty to protect the Indian diplomats as per the Vienna Convention. It has a duty to protect the diplomatic premises. If a consular camp was being held, it's as good as a diplomatic site, which should enjoy diplomatic immunity. And Canadian law enforcement has been clearly missing in action. They should not have allowed the pro-Khalistani extremists in the first place to assemble at the consular camps. Very strict action should be initiated, but given the state of relations and the allegation that Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau clearly has a bias towards pro-Khalistan elements as he's trying to cultivate a vote bank, right? So this leads to serious problems in India-Canada relations, and it highlights the growing concerns with regard to rising pro-Khalistani activities abroad. So this is not a one-off incident. It's part of a larger phenomena that we are witnessing. In fact, in the last couple of years, we have seen many such incidents. Last year, you might remember when India was trying to arrest a Khalistani extremist, Amritpal Singh, and Punjab was placed under a lockdown. And when the Punjab police were hunting down Amritpal Singh, who's the proclaimed leader of Waris Punjab Day, a Khalistani outfit, there were protests that erupted around the world, from Australia to UK to US to Canada. Indian diplomatic missions were targeted, right? From San Francisco to Brisbane, to Melbourne and Sydney to London. We saw many such similar incidents. So India has been urging Western governments, particularly Canada and US, to cooperate with India, to not allow space for these pro-Khalistani extremists who pose a threat, a significant security threat to India. So please make a note of this development. And with this, I have completed the discussion of all the big topics in today's newspaper. Now let's quickly proceed towards the prelim section and take a quick look at the smaller articles in the newspaper. On page number 4, there's an article referring to the Thadou community of Manipur. So first, let's understand the basic facts about the Thadou community, and then we'll come back to the article. We'll understand why the community is in news. The Thadou community is one of the major hill tribes of Manipur. If you know the geography of Manipur, you would know that Imphal The capital is a valley region and it is surrounded by the hills. So in the hills of Manipur, Nagas are dominant, especially in the northeast region of Manipur. The Kukis are dominant in the southeast region. So adjacent to the Naga inhabited hills, you find a community called the Thadou people. They are present in the hills of Manipur, adjacent to the Imphal Valley, next to where the Nagas are found in the northeast region of Manipur. The Thadous are a non-Naga community, a non-Naga tribe, and they are seen as part of the Kuki clan. Currently, you know that Manipur has been burning due to ethnic clashes between the Meiteis, who are in majority, who are found in the Imphal Valley, and the Kukis found in the hill areas. Meiteis have alleged that the Kukis are largely outsiders. They have even labeled them as illegal settlers and refugees and migrants, which is clearly denied because Kukis belong to India. But of course, Kukis are connected to the Zomi community across the border in Myanmar. And these communities, they share familial linkages. The Kuki-Zo community was divided by the British era border between India and Burma. So on both sides of the boundary, the Kuki-Zo community is divided. So most of the Kuki-Zos in India are of course Indian citizens. There's no doubt about it. But Meiteis treat them as outsiders. And the ethnic clashes, right, which occurred last year, has been a result of the tensions between these communities. So the Thadou community, which is seen as part of the Kuki clan, they have tried to create a distinction from the Kuki. Since Meiteis are targeting Kukis by labeling them as outsiders, as illegal settlers, the Thadou community doesn't want to fall into that bracket. So Thadou community has tried to create a distinction for itself from the Kuki community. They speak the Thadou language or the Chin language, right? If you look at their economic activity, it's mainly subsistence agriculture, jhum cultivation, basic hunting, fishing, etc. So this community has the scheduled tribe status. The Thadou community is recognized as a scheduled hill tribe. This status is provided to Nagas as well and the Kukis as well. Nagas and Kukis also enjoy the ST status in Manipur. In fact, this is the root cause of the resentment of the Meiteis, as Meiteis who are in majority don't have the ST status. So they have been demanding the ST status, and the recent clashes broke out over this issue when the High Court ordered the consideration of ST status for Meiteis, which was opposed by the Kuki community who are in minority. So what you need to learn here is that the Thadou community, which are seen as part of the Kuki clan, they have tried to create a distinction, tried to separate themselves from the Kuki community so that they are not targeted by the Meiteis. So here you can see the traditional wear of the Thadou community. They are also found in other parts of northeast India. They are dispersed across Nagaland, parts of Assam and Meghalaya, but primarily they are found in the hill regions of Manipur. Next to Imphal Valley in the non-Naga hills, that's where the Thadou community is found. So since the community is trying to separate itself from the Kuki clan and it's trying to avoid any friction with the Meiteis, the community has expressed support for NRC, the National Register for Citizens. In Assam, NRC exercise was promised under the Assam Accord of 1985. It basically updates the National Register of Citizens, which helps in identifying Indian citizens and it will help in distinguishing the foreigners. That is particularly the illegal migrants. So in Assam, NRC has been conducted recently under the monitoring of the Supreme Court of India. As promised under the Assam Accord, a Supreme Court monitored NRC was conducted to identify the genuine Indian citizens and distinguish them from the illegal migrants who have come in from Bangladesh. So a similar NRC-like exercise is being demanded in Manipur by the Meiteis, as the Meiteis are targeting the Kuki-Zo community and labeling all Kuki-Zos as illegal migrants, right? Which is not acceptable because many Kuki-Zo families are Indians. They have been divided by the borders. They are found on both sides of the border. To label everyone as an illegal migrant is, again, not the right position, but that is the root cause of the ethnic tensions. So the Meiteis, with the alleged backing of the Manipur state government, have been demanding the NRC exercise to identify the genuine Indian citizens and distinguish the illegal migrants. So Thadou community doesn't want to get caught in between the Meiteis and the Kukis and their rivalries and tensions. That's why it is trying to create a distinction for itself, and it has expressed support for NRC. It has expressed complete support for holding a NRC to identify the genuine Indian citizens and to identify the illegal migrants. Next, on page number 4, we have an article referring to the Kalka Shimla train route. If you have ever visited Himachal Pradesh, I'm sure you would have visited this historic railway track. It's a British era narrow gauge railway track. It's a narrow gauge railway track on which a toy train has been running for more than a century. It was built in late 1800s, early 1900s to create connectivity with the hill station of Shimla, and today it is a recognized UNESCO World Heritage Site. In the year 2008, it has been listed on UNESCO's World Heritage Site list. So you can understand the cultural value, the heritage value of the toy train, the Kalka Shimla railway track route. Now, Himachal Pradesh is focusing on moving towards clean energy. As part of India's climate change commitments, states are also making their contribution under the nationally determined contributions of Paris Agreement. And Himachal Pradesh has set a target for itself to move away from fossil fuels and completely shift towards clean energy. So it has urged the central government to use green hydrogen instead of the traditional fossil fuel to power the Kalka Shimla toy train, which is a UNESCO recognized World Heritage Site. So that is the development that you need to understand. Next, on page 16, Israel has cut off its ties with UNRWA. Israel has formally announced at the United Nations that it is cutting off its ties with UNRWA. So what is UNRWA? This UN agency has been in the news since last year. It stands for UN Relief Works Agency for Palestinian Refugees in the Near East. See, in 1948, when Israel violated the two-state solution, when Israel broke the two-state plan and unilaterally declared independence, it led to the exodus of Palestinian refugees. As the Jews were targeting Palestinians, Palestinians were targeting the Jews, and Israel unilaterally declared independence by violating the UN plan with support from US and UK. The Palestinians, millions of them, they were left stateless. Palestine was never created, but Israel declared its independence on its own. So following this, the clashes escalated, and Israel, the state which was born, would target the Palestinians, and most of them were evicted and exiled from their homeland. So millions of Palestinian refugees were driven out in what is referred to as a catastrophe, or the Nakba of 1948. This was immediately followed by the Israel war, the Israel-Arab war, as the neighboring Arab countries attacked Israel to protect Palestinian rights. And as a result of the conflict as well, many Palestinians were driven out from the Palestinian homeland. So to take care of the Palestinian refugees, to provide basic administration to them, because they don't belong to any country, Palestine has never been allowed to form as a country by Israel. So to provide for human development of Palestinians, the refugees of the Nakba, the UN set up a relief agency called UNRWA in 1949. Following the exodus of Palestinian refugees, some of them were settled in Gaza, some were settled in West Bank, and some moved to neighboring countries like Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, etc. So to provide human development for these Palestinian refugees of the 1948 Nakba, a UN relief agency was set up. Many UN members contribute funds to this agency, including India. India, which supports the right of Palestinians. India, which has maintained ideological commitment to help create the country of Palestine, has been one of the donors to UNRWA. Regularly, we provide few $1 million in funding. Even recently, India provided, I think, $5 million in funding to UNRWA. So many countries donate to the relief agency, and Israel has been working with UNRWA to allow the UN Relief Agency to provide for relief to the Palestinian refugees. But since last year, a major controversy has erupted. Last year on October 7th, Hamas, the Palestinian extremist outfit based out of Gaza, carried out a brutal terror attack against Israel. That is what led Israel to trigger the Gaza war, which has completely consumed the West Asia region. But in this terror attack of October 7th, Israel has alleged that several workers of UNRWA were involved in assisting Hamas to carry out the attack. Israel has alleged that workers of UNRWA helped Hamas. They used their UN access to assist Hamas in planning and executing this deadly terror attack. But Israel till date has not been able to provide any credible proof or evidence. So, using this allegation, Israel has been targeting UNRWA since several months. It even convinced many Western countries, which are allies of Israel, to cut off funding to UNRWA. This had already affected the ability of the agency to provide relief to millions of Palestinian refugees across Gaza, Jordan, West Bank, and Lebanon and Syria. So now Israel has formally cut off its relations with this agency, which means Israel will not cooperate with UNRWA. It will not allow the Relief Works Agency to carry on with its work. Now, this is very dangerous news because this will leave the Palestinians without any protection, without any relief and basic development which UNRWA was providing. So most countries have criticized this decision of Israel. Even its closest ally, United States, has criticized the decision of Israel to cut off ties with UNRWA. So that is the development. Now coming to the last article for today. On the supplement page of Science and Tech section, there's an article referring to the Convention on Biological Diversity. Recently, COP16 of Convention on Biological Diversity was held at Cali in Colombia. Colombia hosted the Conference of Parties, the 16th Conference of Parties at Cali to the Convention on Biological Diversity. So at this summit, there has been no major outcome, which is very disappointing. There has been no major outcome. The countries have failed to arrive at a consensus, especially with regard to financing. See, CBD convention is very crucial for biodiversity protection and conservation. Just like climate change convention, the UNFCCC, which is the prime convention for climate change and climate action. Similarly, CBD is to biodiversity conservation and protection. They both were adopted at the Rio Earth Summit in early 1990s. CBD and Climate Change Convention, they were both born out of the Rio Earth Summit itself. So at CBD in 2022, countries had adopted the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. A couple of years ago, the Kunming-Montreal Biodiversity Framework had been adopted. And under this, countries have declared a target, a 30 by 30 target. Countries have announced that they are going to restore, recover, and protect 30% of land and sea area by 2030. This is the 30 by 30 goal. That at least 30% of degraded land and degraded marine ecosystems will be protected and they'll be restored and recovered by the end of the decade. Now, to achieve this ambitious objective, under the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, also called the Global Biodiversity Framework, a Global Biodiversity Fund has been set up. Because for these conservation efforts to restore the degraded biodiversity and ecosystems, it requires a lot of financing, it requires tremendous funding. So countries had made a commitment at Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. They had made a commitment that they will try to mobilize at least 30 billion from rich countries by 2030. The developed countries were supposed to mobilize $30 billion in funding by the end of the decade, which could be provided to the developing underdeveloped countries, which could be used for biodiversity conservation and protection. But even after 2 years, the countries have been able to mobilize just a total of 400 million. At the 16th Conference of Parties in Cali, they have announced a contribution of just 163 million, which now brings the total finances raised to 400 million, which is way short of the $30 billion target. In fact, globally, countries are supposed to mobilize $200 billion annually in order to aid biodiversity conservation efforts. But this is unlikely to happen. Out of this, 30 billion was supposed to come from developed countries, from the rich countries. And they have barely contributed 400 million in total. And at the Conference of Parties, they've announced a total of $163 million in funding. So this is very disappointing. This is mainly because some of the developed countries are cutting back their funding. Their development assistance is seeing a big reduction. In 2015, European countries alone had contributed around $4.6 billion. Now this has dropped to 3.8 billion by 2022, which means the developed countries are not so interested to continue funding the conservation efforts and the environmental efforts under climate change and CBD convention. Countries like Germany and Netherlands, they have announced a major cut in their foreign assistance. Even France and UK, they have also slashed their budget for foreign development assistance. So this is creating a hurdle for financing these environment initiatives. So now all the attention will shift to the 29th Conference of Parties, COP29, under the Climate Change Convention, which is going to begin next week at Baku in Azerbaijan. Immediately after the CBD summit in Cali, Colombia, it will be followed by the Conference of Parties of UN Framework Convention on Climate Change at Baku in Azerbaijan, where countries are going to meet again to discuss about climate change, climate finance, and both are related to each other, both are connected with each other. So the outcome at Cali has been disappointing. So let's see what will happen at the Climate Change Summit in Baku. So on this note, I would like to bring my discussion to an end. I hope you guys have liked and enjoyed the session and understood all the topics. Now, before we close for today, please ensure you join our official Telegram channel. The link is provided in the video description. You can scan the QR code as well, because after the session ends, we provide a daily quiz on these topics. So you can attempt these questions, practice MCQs, and revise these topics and articles as well. So do ensure to follow us on Telegram to attempt this practice quiz, a daily quiz based on the topics that we cover in the daily Hindu analysis. Now, before I wrap up, let me take a quick look at the comments and questions. If there is any doubt, I would like to pick up a couple of questions, and after that, we'll end the session for today. Sandhya says UNSC is meaningless if no action is taken for these activities. Ukraine, Palestine are facing difficulties. They don't have basic fundamental rights right now. Yes, Sandhya, you're absolutely right. The UN Security Council is largely ineffective in dealing with these conflicts. In fact, United Nations as an institution is a failed institution in that regard. That's mainly because the 5 permanent members of UNSC, they misuse their veto power for their own geopolitical interests. The US especially, and even UK and France, sometimes they only look at Western interests. Russia, China, the other permanent members look after only their interests. So these 5 permanent members are misusing UNSC and the UN for their own geopolitical agenda. And hence UN is not at all effective in dealing with any conflict, be it Ukraine, be it Gaza, be it any other civil war condition in Africa or in Myanmar. The UN has become completely toothless. That's the reason why India is pushing for UN reforms, right? That's why India is pushing for reforms of the UN, for inclusion of more permanent members. All right. So these are the questions that I can see here. So that is it for today. Let's catch up tomorrow in the next session. I hope you understood all the topics. If you like the session, do press the like button. That will motivate us to do better, and do comment how the sessions are going on, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. That is it. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.